don't really make no difference. I got to live my own life. Now I'm a simple type of fellow. I don't need much in this old life. Now I read my Bible, Lord have mercy. Try to live my life right. I don't need nobody. Tell me what I ought to do. 'Cause if you really want to help me, just take a walk in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Then you know how I feel. Walk a mile in my shoes. For you judge this man. If you walk in my shoes, you might understand.
Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong, baby. But I tell you what I'm gonna do, look here, little girl. I can't be right always. I can't be wrong always, neither, baby. But you're my baby, sugar. I love you, girl. You're my baby. All of my problems I had, baby, 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 it was yours, just like it was mine, sugar. It was problem, baby, too. Little girl, all of my love is for you, sugar. Now is love here. Little girl, I think I'm right.
The panel starts in 5 minutes. The panel starts in 5 minutes.
All the time I love you. Baby, 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 what love did you bring to me? But I love you, girl. Little girl, that's why I'm not gonna let you be, baby. Baby, I love you, little girl. That's why I've got to be right. Why I can't be right.
I should have stayed gone when I left before. Cause you do me wrong when we're together, but I keep coming back for more. But when I leave this time,
make sure it's understood that this time I'm gone for good. Many times I've left you, but I couldn't stay away too long. Thank God for the strength He gave me to leave home and still be strong. When I leave this time, Lord, make sure it's understood that this time I'm gone for good.
Okay, hello everyone. Can those people outside that want to come in, please? That's it. Move towards the door. I think we need to announce outside, Marco. Thanks, everyone. Can you try and shepherd more people in? Yeah. Okay, well, as more people eventually come in, I'm going to get the ball rolling on this panel, and this is one that I'm really looking forward to. Just to say, in 15 minutes, the parallel panel will begin next door, but this is panel 8, the human dimension of security, human rights defenders' protection in Serbia. And online, we're going to be joined by Dunja Mijetovic, and here in person, we have Katalin Ček, we have Niels Moišnieks, we have Katarina Golubovic, and the moderator is Jovana Spremo. So thank you, everyone.
Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the panel, Human Dimension of Security in the Western Balkans, with the subtitle, Is there a protection for human rights defenders? We have strived to tackle this issue for years, and recently we see the more and more need to actually address the protection of those who are actually protecting the public interest and fighting for the rights of others. Lasting security actually cannot be achieved without the respect for human rights and the democratic institutions. And this is something that is so easily, so fragile and so easily ruined by the governments, especially those who tend to be more autocratic, as the title of the event actually says. So what can we actually do in order to protect citizen security and to protect the security of those who defend the citizens? I'm very pleased to welcome my great panelists today. We have Ms. Dunja Mijatović online, the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights, who will actually provide the introduction to our panel, and then I will speak more with my panelists on the issues on human rights protections and human rights defender protection. Ms. Dunja.
Thank you, Jovana. Greetings to all, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, friends. Special greeting to my friend Niels, who actually used to hold the torch of the office of the Commissioner before I came to the office in 2018. It is a real pleasure to address such a crucial issue as the security of human rights defenders and security in general in Serbia and beyond. I wish I'm there with you in Belgrade, but unfortunately I could not come in person. So we use the possibilities of online exchanges that are so important nowadays. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to look at the importance of the work human rights defenders are doing in our societies. We also have to recognize the work they're doing, and also to pressure those in power, if I can say so, to honor their obligations and hold them accountable. And I think the problem we have in the Western Balkans is still not enough understanding and recognition of the importance of the work of human rights defenders for the societies, in order for the societies to move forward, to be more liberal, modernized, and then at the same time ensure security. Because I do not think we can have real security and talk about safety of citizens if human rights defenders, and I would add here, of course, journalists, can do their job freely and also safely. Human rights defenders, they contribute to shaping public discourse around human rights policies and help also ensure that human rights policies are compliant with international standards. And there are in all ways indispensable allies and natural partners in my work as Commissioner for Human Rights. It would be impossible to tackle issues I'm tackling in all Council of Europe member states if there is not, this recognition, this trust, and possibilities to share information and address issues of concern. Sometimes those issues are quite technical, I would say, but most of the time those issues are sometimes, life-saving and are related to the grave human rights violations that are happening in, unfortunately, too many Council of Europe member states. Support for their work, their protection, and the promotion of an enabling environment for their activities lie at the core of my mandate. Human rights defenders are even mentioned in the mandate of the Commissioner. And I'm also determined to continue advocating for this. I'm very much alarmed by the conditions in which human rights defenders operate both in Serbia and in the region. And I'm worried to see that they are constantly endangered and pressured. What we see is reprisal from state, but also non-state actors, and that presents a huge problem, and also the impunity for crimes committed against them. They are also singled out, as you know, by some public officials or public figures or media outlets as foreign agents, traitors or collaborators, all absurd and dangerous lies, I would say. I'm particularly concerned by the increasing risks faced by human rights defenders who expose corruption and threats to environment, those working on transitional justice, and LGBTI activists. The arrest of environmental activists in Novi Sad for their work opposing deforestation and planned construction of a bridge across the Danube, 3 defamation lawsuits, so-called SLAPs, submitted recently against 2 young environmental activists in Bosnia and Herzegovina because of their public campaign against the construction of hydropower plants, death threats and smear campaigns against the crime and corruption reporting network KRIK in Serbia last year are only a few dire illustrations of the problem. Nevertheless, I'm closely following all of this. I consider human rights defenders key to help the region to come out of a difficult past and face the challenging present in a way which promotes social cohesion and dignity for all. If we are not ready to expose the problems, to discuss them, and to have possibilities to build bridges based on trust and truth, then I do not think the region is moving in a right direction. I just returned yesterday from Dublin, where I met many human rights defenders from different parts of the Council of Europe member states, including human rights defenders from Russia and Belarus, listening to their struggle, to their fight in order to do their job, trying to promote human rights, trying to shield and to help the most vulnerable parts of the society, dealing with issues related to women's rights, LGBTI rights, children's rights, people with disabilities, so the people that are really marginalized and trying to really access their rights. I would add here Roma population, migrants, but there are many others. So they told me about the struggle, the attempts by the governments, East and West, to silence them, to silence their critical voices, to make all possible obstacles to their work. And this is an issue I will continue following, but also raising with Council of Europe member states at the earliest possible occasion. We cannot continue holding, societies and talking about human rights importance for the life and well-being of people if the governments are simply neglecting obligations, resolutions that are voluntarily agreed upon when they became members of Council of Europe, which we call the main human rights body in Europe. And at the same time, the main human rights body in Europe has member states that are imprisoning, torturing, arresting human rights defenders and journalists. And this has to stop. This needs to change. And in a post-pandemic world, it is even more relevant than ever before. So I'm really in awe of the courage, dedication, and determination of human rights defenders. I just met several from Ukraine who are doing impossible work under shelling. And I use this opportunity also to pay tribute to their extraordinary work. There are also many Russian human rights defenders and ones from Belarus constantly traveling and doing their work in a very difficult situation. I saw this with my own eyes when I visited Ukraine in May and spoke to them. So they are a source of motivation, and they make me feel an additional responsibility to try to do, together with my team, everything in order to support them and to exercise my mandate in the fullest. So I can only say that you can count on me to keep calling on the authorities of member states to deliver on their duty to foster an environment in which defenders may conduct their work safely, free from fear of threats, violence, and reprisals. And I wish you a wonderful discussion. I will also stay for a while in order to listen to other distinguished panelists and then also maybe engage a bit later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mijatovic, and thank you for this encouragement words. This is especially important for the region countries when you usually have to go all the way around in order to pressure the government to provide the right amount of protection not only to human rights defenders but to their citizens. So we have been discussing now for a day and a half different kind of security issues, but I would like to repeat something that Oleksandra Matvichuk yesterday said, and that is that it all starts with a human security. So this is a starting point, and if we don't care about the human dimension of the security, it can easily go to and become and to create other security issues within the region. So the governments are supposed to change, but what's not supposed to change is the level of protection that we are guaranteeing to the citizens. And we have seen recently, not only in the region, but throughout Europe, the further deterioration and the violations to freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, even the freedom of association. And it has struck the region of Western Balkans very, very hard in the last few years. Especially these three freedoms are more and more limited and endangered. So I would like to discuss firstly with you on what do you see as the most violated rights at this point in the region, and how can we actually call for these mispractices of the government to stop at some point. My first panelist will be Mr. Mujnieks, who is the director of Europe Regional Office of Amnesty International. Ms. Mijatovic already mentioned that you kept her role in the previous mandate, so you are very experienced in monitoring, let's say, the situation of the human rights violations. The recent Amnesty report actually tackled a lot of these issues, and I see that it's becoming more and more detailed on the issues that are tackling the region, especially Serbia and Bosnia. So I would like to hear your current thinking on what can we do to increase the protection of the rights, and what are the most endangered rights currently at the region.
Well, thank you very much for having me here, and it's such an honor to be on the same panel with my successor, Dunja, and with distinguished colleagues from around the region. At Amnesty International, we see the right to freedom of expression and the right to freedom of assembly as being very closely intertwined and linked. It's very difficult to organize a demonstration to mobilize people if you don't have freedom of the media, freedom of expression. And now increasingly people are using their right to protest to demand and defend their rights. This is why Amnesty is focusing on the right to protest as one of our key global priorities. And we see it's very topical in this region as well. I think one of the issues of greatest concern to me in this region is the attempts by politicians, influential business people, to silence criticism, especially by using slap suits. Dunja already mentioned this. The use of defamation and defamation laws and slap suits was already widespread in the region a few years ago, but I think we've seen an explosion in recent times here. She mentioned several of the cases that Amnesty is also involved in. In Kosovo, we defended environmental activists against a slap suit from an Austrian energy company. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, we're now assisting these same environmental activists that Dunja mentioned. She mentioned KRIK in Serbia, and in Slovenia, one media outlet has 39 slap suits against it, which is quite amazing that activists and journalists have to spend all of their time fighting off lawsuits, spending money, spending time in courts just to do their job. So we see this as being a crucial threat to democracy, to human rights in the region, and we see these freedoms as being very closely linked. And this is why we intend to engage on this issue going forward quite actively. This and the right to protest, I think, are two of the biggest issues that we're going to be looking at in the coming months and years.
Perfect. When we speak of protests, I will turn to Ms. Čech. You are a member of European Parliament and actually a member of subcommittee on human rights. And we recently had actually large protests in your country, in Hungary. So I would like to hear more from you. How do you see these recent trends? And does the problems that citizens are facing in Western Balkans are actually differ from other parts of Europe that you are monitoring when preparing the resolutions in the European Parliament?
Well, first of all, I would also like to thank you for the invitation and for the possibility to be here with you in beautiful Belgrade and to discuss on this absolutely crucial topic. Because as you mentioned, there is a trend. There is a trend that has been going on for years, the trend of democratic backsliding, the trend of rolling back freedoms, the trend of growing authoritarianism, with all the challenges and difficulties it poses for everybody who stands up for human rights, for the freedom of expression, for the rights of minorities. And this trend is not only present in the Western Balkans, not only present in some specific member states of the European Union that we often talk about, but I believe this is a global trend. And we are not paying enough attention to this, and our tools and mechanisms are still not there to match this challenge. And another part of the trend is the similar patterns that tend to appear over and over again, not only in neighboring countries, but also in countries that are geographically a bit farther away, like in the United States, or in Israel, or in this region, or in Hungary, in Poland, the slap suits that were just mentioned, or the establishment of government-sponsored NGOs that are diluting the public space and taking away possibilities for those speaking up who are really standing up for good causes, or the increasing trend, I have to say directly from Vladimir Putin's playbook, to label NGOs as foreign agents, or to try to make it more difficult for them to access funding, to access legal remedies. These are trends that authoritarians are learning from each other. And I have to say that under the watchful eye of the European Union and the international community. So what I would like to really stress is that we in the EU, we have to do much more to defend human rights. Also with funding, also with direct channels for access to justice for them. But I also believe that we just have to be much more vocal. And particularly in a region where the accession of the EU is, of course, a strategic principle that we all share, human rights have to be put on the table much more intensively. There should not be any dialogue. Mr. Varhelyi engages with the leaders of Western Balkan countries without pointing out on the specific instances that are very, very clearly illustrated. And I'm afraid that he is not doing an appropriate job here. And this is really a problem. And a closing thought here, we also have to put our house in order inside the EU, because we can only be a credible actor for human rights and democracy outside the EU and in the countries which we would like to engage with more closely if we put our own house in order and if we do not stand idly by when European Union member states are projecting the very similar signs of democratic backsliding that we are supposedly fighting against outside the EU. So the instruments have to be updated, also the financial instruments, and I'm very happy to announce that we are working in the European Parliament on the update of the guidelines for human rights defenders. So I'm also very much looking for inputs on how we could be an even stronger and an even more forceful actor for the protection of the global good.
Okay, this is good news that it's actually becoming a topic. We recently actually saw the European Commission reports on the region. So the novelty in the Serbia's report is that these freedoms actually gain much more space than they were getting for previous several years. So freedom of assembly, of course, due to the bans of Europride, got a pretty much detailed description of what the government is not doing well. And the human rights defenders and civil society is being more and more mentioned in the context of the need of protection. And my final panelist is Ms. Katarina Golubovic, President of Lawyers Committee for Human Rights and a member of JCC. So I would like, since EUCOM is basically providing free legal aid, so you get in touch with the people on daily level, and their human rights violation and issues. Do you see, given the current situation with security and the level that the current conflict is affecting the Western Balkans, do you see the difference in the level of violation of human rights? Is there any kind of connection? And what are the rights that are most endangered in Serbia? And are there mechanisms to protect them?
Thank you. Thank you for a lot of questions. I must say that I think that these endangered rights are actually a result of weak institutions, weak democratic institutions. So in time of crisis, the weak institutions actually want to hear the messages from the political figures. So we don't have the protection and we don't have the process of protection of human rights. And that's why we have, these kind of riots, of protests, because people do not believe anymore in the institutional protection. So that's why we speak now about protest, and that's why we speak about the breach of freedom of assembly. So everything is interconnected, yeah? So when we speak about crisis, we actually see that the protection of human rights actually is, how to say, the answer on political messages. So when you don't have a clear messages, you can see this. For example, when the Russian aggression started, we had the anti-war peaceful protests, so peaceful standing in the Belgrade city center. So we were in the pedestrian zone, and it was processed by the police. Why? Because we didn't have a clear message from Serbia. Is this a good message for our international relations or not? So this was the first time that you see the institutions, Ministry of Interior, that actually start to process peaceful protests of 30 people in the street. So this is how the crisis actually impact on human rights protection. So I just want to also say that regarding the protection, as you mentioned, we have to rely on human rights defenders. Why? Because human rights defenders can bring international standards and values to our courts, our national protector of rights. Yes, we rely on protection of international community, but we also need the protection in our countries. So if we are so loud, as the other panelists said, we can make some difference, and we can actually pull our courts to protect freedom of assembly or freedom of information. We have also a lot of slabs here in Serbia these days, but if we see this process through angle of values, we will see that we can, have the protective mechanism from our courts. But the problems are actually values, and that is why the human rights defenders had the big role in making one society democratic ones.
I want to tackle this issue of protection by the international community. So if we, of course, we can see different isolated incidents. We can say that human rights defenders are endangered here and there, they're pressured or similar, but no one is actually stressing the importance of reporting on these issues. So in preparing the report of Amnesty, who are you relying on? Like, what are the sources that you actually need in the region in order to in order to get the right information so that you can tackle it in the report? And then we know that only this pressure that comes from the outside can actually maybe make a difference when it comes to the region.
Yeah, Amnesty reports are an interesting beast because they're not reports for the sake of reports. Every report that Amnesty produces is meant to be campaignable. It's supposed to be used to campaign on behalf of human rights change, and it's also to be used for advocacy work at European institutions, at UN level, and so on. We don't have a large presence in this region. The only country in the region that has a national section is Slovenia. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of interest in European sections to become more active here, by AI Italy, by AI Austria, by AI Netherlands, and by others. So we hope to scale up our work here. The way that our researchers usually work is Amnesty research focuses on victims and the testimony of victims. And the interview process is quite rigorous. I recently witnessed it for the first time because I came on board relatively recently. Gathering the testimony of victims of human rights violations is an absolute kind of core of the whole process. And of course, we rely very much on local actors. Where we don't have national sections, we rely on local actors, on journalists, on human rights defenders, on NGOs, and we try to understand the landscape, but to amplify the voices of people on the ground and to amplify the voices of victims. This is a core approach, and of course we're only too happy when media pick up on our reports and steal from us. When the findings of our reports are reflected in the work of international organizations, because that has a multiplier effect. So this is a key, to give voice to the victims of human rights violations. That's our primary goal. Perfect.
And European Parliament is also reporting on different issues, but including on human rights defenders. So how does your system function? So where do you find the information that you can actually state in the reports? And how do you further use, do you have any kind of follow-up after your reports? Because when they are out, they are for everyone, but we never have this feedback from the governments, let's say, that will tackle the issues that the parliament, as a, let's say, only people, institutions in the EU can tackle.
I believe that the European Parliament has an extremely important role in global human rights advocacy, because we are a body which is, I think, one of the bravest parliaments in the world when trying to put out issues on the agenda that very often nobody else touches. And for this, it's absolutely instrumental, of course, that our European Parliament secretariats, but also our MEP offices are regularly in touch with human rights defenders, but also with global organizations like Amnesty, for instance, for getting the best sources of what's happening on the ground. I think our reports are quite good quality. Of course, it could also be improved, but the real question here is indeed the enforcement, like what happens afterwards. And here, I would really welcome a closer cooperation from the Commission, for instance, because we can write all the nice and beautiful reports on human rights defenders or violations of rights as we wish, but if there is like any type of discussion on trade, on accession, on any other bilateral or multilateral issues, I think the Commission has to be obliged to put human rights issues to the top of the agenda. And we also should improve our instruments, our trade deals, for instance, or our due diligence laws to cover more ground. So the impact of the EU could also grow larger. Because let's face it, right now, also the war of aggression in our neighborhood is a war between democracies and autocracies. And if the EU really wants to be a global player, as I believe we should, we have to be a player that has democracy and the protection of rights at the center of its agenda. So I hope that there will be an even closer cooperation between Parliament and the relevant bodies, and I'm very much welcoming the very good efforts of those who are already following suit, but there should be much more improvement, and particularly on one side, on enforcement, because the legal framework is very often there. Yeah. You probably know more about that. During the accession talks, for instance, there were a lot of changes made. It's there on paper, and then it's not getting implemented. And the Commission has to be extremely vocal here. I don't want papers, I want results, I want real protection for people, and if it is not happening, then we have a problem, so we shouldn't be having problems.
Thank you. I would like to ask Ms. Mijatovic if you can provide us with more information on the feedback from the countries when you are stating that there are certain issues and violation of human rights, especially when they tackle human rights defenders as such.
Yeah, there are so many extremely important issues that all of you already raised. I think the issue of feedback or a response from the government is extremely important, particularly when it comes to country reports or letters that I sent in relation to certain human rights violations. At the same time, what I have to say, if we talk about accession process, if we talk about candidate and potential candidate countries to the EU, I think, and this is what I raised publicly, but also in my talks with different commissioners, Parliament is quite different, European Parliament. They are much stronger with their, what Catalina was saying, much stronger views and much stronger language that is used addressing Balkan leaders. And here I can also take off my commissioner's hat and talk as a person from the region, somebody who do understand a bit more on how you need to address certain issues. I think the problem is that the issues related to human rights are not discussed in a way that they should, that they are not exposed as much as I would like to see. The language is more technical in the progress report. You have many summits on the Western Balkan, and you see talks about technical issues. A need to improve freedom of the media, freedom of assembly. It is repeating year by year, but not actual sort of push in to doing something that is really important to change situation that is very problematic. Some states do respond with certain changes. It depends really on the leaders if they are genuinely willing to engage. It happens also that almost every other day I'm persona non grata in one of the member states because the government or the authorities that I'm addressing simply do not want to engage and are simply flatly denying allegations in relation to human rights, which I think is very problematic because we all coming from international organizations or, global NGOs like Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, people are working hard in order to check, double check, triple check the information they receive. They engage with governments, they ask for changes, but then at the end, it is quite frustrating to see that there is not much going on. What was also raised by Catalina, and I think it's very important, is that the European Union member states should lead by example. For many decades, EU was a safe oasis when it comes to work of human rights defenders and journalists, not any longer, not after Daphne's murder, not after murder of Jan Kuciak and his fiancée, Lara McKee, Northern Ireland, and many other cases that are actually proving that much more needs to be done in order to change a very problematic situation. I'm really glad to hear what Neil said, that Amnesty is increasing their attention and presence, because I think it's needed. There is a need to see more recognition and more support for human rights defenders in the region. And there are great people, courageous people, working in a very difficult situation, but at the same time, somehow I feel they're neglected in those very important political talks, apart from really having just meetings in order to show, yes, we do meet the civil society. And then at the end, we have these wonderful words on paper, agreements, and acceptance of certain things that needs to be changed. But in practice, and when we travel to the field, the situation is quite different, and it is very problematic.
Thank you. I will turn now to Katarina. 3 years ago, you started officially monitoring the situation with human rights defenders within the network of Solidarity for the Rights of All. What are the results of this monitoring, and how do you reach local human rights defenders, and has this data that is collected actually changed anything when it comes to the reaction and the increasing of protection of human rights defenders?
Yeah, so our task is was to make the problems of human rights defenders in Serbia recognized on the international level. So as I said, that if we have the protection of international community, we are protected. And the map of incident was a tool to present to international community the problems of human rights defenders. We succeeded to collect all relevant data because we actually defend human rights defenders, and they talked with us about real problems on the local level. We are there for them because they do not believe in, for example, the attorneys at law that lives there, and often the attorneys at law are in connection with the local officials who are actually jeopardize their rights. So that's why our existence is very important for their protection. So they called us, we protect them at the court, and also they called us to just to inform us about some pressures because they done something, or they just criticize some problems in their local level, in environmental spheres, or etc., etc. So the problems are really different, but the pressures are the same. So we have the pressure on freedom of expression. We have a lot of slap suits in some municipalities. And we actually see that the court change their views about the level of protection that human rights defenders should have. And everything is presented on the map. So we don't have just the incidents, we have also the answers of our institutions, the answers of media, the answers of public officials, but also the answers of international community. now, as Dunja Mijatovic said, we have to have not just the legal analysis of the position of human rights defenders in our progress report, but also we have to have the data about the attacks and what are the problems. So we actually made it to put this map of incidents and data from the map in the progress report, and now actually we have the good base to track the improvement of the position of human rights defenders. So I think that this map is very valuable tool, not just for us. I think that we should share this map to all human rights defenders in the region, because it also relies on similar maps that are developed in the international level and European Union level.
Okay, so I will stop now for a moment to see whether there are any questions at this point from the audience. Mm-hmm. Do we have a mic?
Thank you. It's working. I'm Miloš Antić, and I will address these 3 questions as a human rights defender, as president of the governing board of the Independent Journalists Association of Vojvodina. Human rights defenders are rarely working individually, usually working in some organizations or groups or movements. So I want to address these questions from that angle. Regarding European issues, we heard that there will be some changes in financial instruments and that there will be some changes in guidelines. Regarding the financial instruments, we had that news or actually info in the January 20 this year that 700 million euros were not spent really well for the rule of law. So are there any intentions to give a little bit more money to the civic sector and not to give it all to the states? That's one question regarding IPA. And I can deepen that regarding financial instruments, but that's enough for now. And regarding the guidelines, we have experiences in the last couple of years where we are approaching delegations in the region to support non-financially human rights defenders, meetings, organizations, or whatever. And the first and the only question is that EU financed project? If not, well, I don't know. So are those guidelines going to change something? Because you announced some changes. And the third question for Ms. Golubovic is actually, you are usually approaching these individual cases and cases of attacks. Are you thinking about approaching these organizational needs or group needs also regarding protection of human rights defenders? Thank you.
Will you start?
Yes, sure. First of all, thank you very much for your questions, and I would actually love to stay in touch with you to get a bit more into the guidelines from your perspective, just as a pretext. But yes, regarding the guidelines, the problem that you mention is very prevalent, and this is something that we should tackle. So the EU has guidelines, and they are all recommendations or suggestions or like a framework. There is not really an obligation for the delegations to keep it. So we see delegations who are, more adhering to the spirit of the guidelines, and others are a bit more selective here. It also, of course, depends on who is the leader there, what like other things are in play. I think that, of course, all of our delegations are trying to do a good job, but there is, let's say, a fluctuation or of importance of the human rights issue. And I believe that we have to have guidelines that are binding, or at least like a stronger guidance for making a uniform position, no matter where you are in the globe. If you go into an EU delegation, you should have the same level of dedication and the same level of service. And for what I also believe it's a big problem is that in a lot of EU delegations, and I'm not sure about Serbia, so I don't know how it is here, but it is also not really clear that who is the person responsible for human rights. You go on the website and you see like a lot of email address, but there is not really an explanation of who does what. So there has to be, I believe, a specific person at every delegation who is the contact point for human rights defenders, whose task would center at helping you also non-financially with those types of efforts. Because let's face it, if you have such a need, where else to go but to the EU delegation? We should be there to help you. And I think we have to be much more flexible. So thank you for this feedback. And I'm sure I will try to take it forward as much as possible. Regarding the financing, well, just like a minute going back to the trends that you mentioned, actually, I'm from Hungary, so EU member state. And we are having the same advocacy campaign for the European cohesion funds to be sent directly to the civil sector and not through the government. So the authoritarian backsliding has an effect on similar purposes in different instruments. So I certainly hope that there will be a movement here as well. What I would like to point out is there was a new instrument called the NDICI established that is separated from the IPA, and it provides a much more flexible leeway for human rights causes, but there is certainly space for improvement, and I think that the Human Rights Committee has to be more vocal in the financial design of the budget and also other new instruments, because we should really spend this money for the benefit of the cause with as little bureaucracy as possible, as directly for those who are on the ground as possible. So this is my dedication, and I would really like to be there for you to help you.
Okay. So the second question was about non-financial support. So who would you? Okay, but who would you like to answer? Will you?
Regarding non-financial support, it is the crucial one, I think, especially when we have, the problems with the specific problems. You can remember the situation when Anna was arrested and when Dunja Mijatović actually said that it was unlawful, etc. So this kind of intervention and also can prevent, not just solve the problem. I think that the role of international organizations and the protection mechanisms are crucial for prevention of escalation of violence. For example, now I think that is the good momentum to actually prevent the escalation of violation in Novi Sad. So this kind of support we really, really need. The second question was also for me personally. Lawyers Committee for Human Rights, but not just we. We are together with also Belgrade Security Center, sorry, and also Public Parliament from Leskovac. So we don't reach to people. People are reaching us, and not just people, also the organization. Yesterday, I got a phone call from one organization from Leskovac because the attack was announced from the police. Some inspectors of commercial crime asked for them just to come today and to present all statutes, all agreements on donation, etc., etc. So they had just called, come to tomorrow and bring me everything. So, and that was the answer on the attack of them towards one, how to say, Gongos NGO on the local level, and their security was jeopardized for a long time this summer. So we didn't have any reaction from the prosecution regarding the attacks on them, and this is very prominent organization that I think is established in 1990s. So we talk about Women in Peace, and people from my organization do not know the details because, you know, it is the newest attack. And you have, you know, the answers when someone whose credibility is, you know, suspicious. So you have the prosecution is reacting. So this kind of attacks we are dealing with, and not just we are defending, but also we want to prove that we are on the right side, and if we want, we also will use the legal means to attack those who attacked us.
Willie, you wanted to add on the non-financial support something?
Yes, just a very brief remark that I think it's problematic if people are turned away if the project is not an EU finance project. And I do think that the responsibility should be universal. So I think the guidelines have to be more flexible here, as it is a matter of life and death in some instances. And publicity really saves lives. I really see that. If we make a statement, if we make like a press release or a resolution, and there are people specifically named that, I don't know, they are jailed unjustly or they are under threat, very often this is the lifeline that they get for getting their safety back. So if we can play a role as the EU, apart from financing, it's here. Just to use this like very big microphone that our voters gave to our hand is the best use for this is really to speak very loudly through to power and advocate for those who are fighting the hardest fight. So we have to make space for that, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Do we have more questions?
Hello.
It's on, it's on.
Oh, thank you. Hello. I have no question. I have a comment to add, if you allow. I think that there is an even bigger problem. The problem is in the dehumanization of human rights. It's when corporations have all rights which they are entitled, but they are not responsible for the violation of human rights. And I think that there is that the prohibition of torture and the inhuman and degrading treatment is more and more violated, especially in Starica case, where people are being detained and tortured. So I think that Council of Europe has to work on the convention treating the human rights violation by the corporations, because I think that states will continue to be responsible only by vehicle rule. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. Business is somehow becoming a new problem when it comes to human rights violation. We have several cases in Serbia when it comes to different foreign investments, and I think it needs to be tackled more in future. But thank you for the comment. I would like to give you the last set of questions, but I would like to hear a view from all of you. We heard that the institutions are not very eager to defend human rights defenders, the national ones, the regional ones. The only protections that we get is via international community, let's say. So what can human rights defenders do in order to ensure the security of themselves? So how can they protect themselves in order to protect those whom they defend? And I would like to have a tour the table, let's say. Niels, will you start?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think first of all, human rights defenders have to seek coalitions with others because very often repressive governments use divide and rule tactics and try to pick out certain bad NGOs and to cultivate relations with others. So that the issue of solidarity among human rights NGOs and cooperation is absolutely critical, I think. This is what we do, a lot of solidarity actions, because it's very tough to continue fighting if you think you're alone. If you think you're alone in your country, if you think you're alone internationally. I think the other is to touch base again with the base, to not get too divorced from your rank and file members, from the public, and this is a big danger. We're very aware of this because we're a membership-based organization. We rely very much on relations with our constituencies, with our audiences. Third is to be as smart as the corporations and the governments trying to repress us. And this means, especially in this day and age, it means being conversant and knowledgeable about the use of high tech to repress human rights. We're lucky in Amnesty, we have a specialized branch called Amnesty Tech, and we're actually intervening in a case in the Serbian Constitutional Court with some other NGOs here against on a case involving the law on social cards, using algorithmic discrimination by the government and so on. And this knowledge of how tech works, I think, is becoming increasingly important, especially when you have the use of facial recognition technologies, when you have kind of this concept of safe cities coming in. So I think that's incredibly important. And finally, I think the knowledge of how to make the European institutions work for you. How to make the European Union, the Council of Europe, the OSCE, the UN, how to make these mechanisms work. How to communicate with them, how to use their findings, how to implicate them so that they become allies at the local level for human rights struggles. And this is, it's tough because the Council of Europe and the EU are very complicated mechanisms, but I think it's absolutely essential. It is one of the best developed systems in the world, but we have to make it work. We have to make it work for us, and human rights defenders are absolutely critical in making this system work for the benefit of everybody.
Thank you. We are writing everything down. Dunja?
Just briefly, I think Niels already raised all the important issues, from solidarity, which I think is important, crucially important. And I will use the example. I was in September, I came to Belgrade in order to be with human rights defenders for Europe Pride, and to work with them and to make sure that everything goes smoothly. At the same time, I was talking to the high-level officials, but I was working there with human rights defenders, constantly trying to see what are the problems. But what I missed is actually more solidarity from other NGOs and civil society organizations in Serbia that were willing to come also to help the ones that are fighting for LGBTI rights. And this is just one example. In most of the cases, they stay in their bubble, defending only, one group of people. So this kind of solidarity, I think, is becoming even more crucial nowadays. Then digital security, of course, is absolutely essential. And I would add to this psychosocial support. People working in a difficult environment, helping migrants in the forests, at the borders, at the seas, seeing people being killed, constantly dying in the Mediterranean and at the borders of Europe are particularly vulnerable. And this is just one example. this is an issue that needs to be taken into account. Currently, human rights defenders working in Ukraine, they need more support. Again, psychosocial, but also solidarity from others that would join their forces and their voices when it's difficult and dark time. And we are going through one, and I do not think we should simply just neglect this and live in our own comfort zone. So even more solidarity from human rights defenders can also bridge some difficult situations and expose the importance of their work across the borders than not only on the national level.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Katalin?
I have a hard time answering this question because I don't want to tell you what to do because you know it better than I do. Probably, I can only say that I have all the respect for you for doing what you are doing in sometimes extremely difficult environments, and I can only salute you for your stance for LGBTI rights, for women's rights, for rights of journalists, for freedom of information, for the fight against corruption, even in cases when your physical safety is in danger. So what I can only advise you is to reach out to us, to European authorities, to UN authorities, and be pushy. We might be a bit difficult, we might be a bit bureaucratic, but we really want to hear your voice, and we want to be here for you, and we can only do good policy if we are supported by strong voices from the ground. We need your knowledge and also your reports, so please let us know what's going on, and also the delegations, let they know what's going on, because really our job should be is to assist you in your fight that we respect so much. And without a strong and democratic Western Balkans, the entire safety and security of the whole European project is in danger. So we need to work together for this. And we in the European Parliament and in the Renew Europe group, where I'm a vice chair of, we really want to be there for you to support your fight in whatever instruments we have, and we want to use the publicity available for us to help your cause. So just a very big thank you and a huge respect from my side here.
Thank you, Katalin. And Katarina from the field.
At the national level, I think that the most important thing is to actually explain to the citizens how important is our work, the work of human rights defenders. And when you have weak institutions, then you have to have the trust of the citizens in your country. So I think that we have to be in synergy with media and journalists and to actually explain to our citizens how important it is to have the free human rights defenders to actually speak about public interest in their country. And when citizens trust you, then you're safe.
Thank you. So we are coming to an end here. I don't know if we answered the question, is there a protection for human rights defenders? But I think we gain a lot of advice on how we can move on from here, and we stress the importance of monitoring and reporting the problems in our countries, especially Western Balkans countries, which strive to become EU members very soon, but somehow getting more and more far from the EU values. We very hope that we will stay on the right track and provide more sources and provide more strength to upkeeping the human dimension of security of the citizens of Western Balkans and the human rights protectors. Thank you.
Much. So now we have lunch for an hour, which is just outside. Thank you all. See you here in an hour.